This is Love Never Fails with your host, Marilyn Redmond. Marilyn shares her experience, strength, and hope, and includes tools to help you find your inner strength for health, healing, and empowerment. So now, please welcome the host of Love Never Fails, Marilyn Redmond.
I'm your host, Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I would really like to welcome everybody back. We had our first session of the show last week. It was a big success. Lots of nice reviews, raves about the show. So I'm glad you're tuning in again today, hopefully with more listeners. This is our second chance at Love Never Fails, and we're glad to have you. And so we want you to know that you can call in and give me your questions at 866-451-1451. And today I'd like to start off with just a little bit of an epilogue from last week's rousing discussion about domestic violence. That's, of course, one aspect of relationships that I didn't really expect to get into, but that's how it kind of fell together. And we didn't really get a chance to say you don't have to keep repeating that dynamic. And what I discovered is when I changed my I was able to pick someone and be in a relationship that was much healthier. Actually, I took a trip to Easter Island with a group of people in the Edgar Cayce Association. They travel all over to wonderful sites. I've gone with them to many places. And on that particular trip to Easter Island, I met a couple that just didn't seem to quite like, I wouldn't have normally put them together. And so I was a little curious. And then all of a sudden I realized I know that man from somewhere. And I couldn't figure out, oh gosh, where do I know him? And I really was racking my brain, and it dawned on me that he had been interviewed on a television show, and he was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. And so that's where I knew him from. And so I was meeting him, and I met his wife, and we were visiting, and I says, well, how'd the two of you meet? And she said, well, they'd been in a museum program together where they were supporting the local museum and would go to lunch afterwards together and visit. And she discovered he had the characteristics she was looking for in a new partner for her. And he realized she had the values and virtues that he was interested in. And so they, of course, reconnected in another way than just a friendship. They actually got married. So they had this wonderful relationship. And so in talking with her, I said, well, how did you move into this better relationship? And she said she had made a list of the characteristics she wanted in a partner and wrote them down. And guess what? The universe did bring that person to her. So when I came home from Easter Island, I wrote my list. And I put everything down that was not in my marriage. Actually, it was the opposite of what was going on. At the top of the list, I put spirituality, honesty, trustworthy, loyal, sincere, and truthful. And I put the list in the drawer and didn't really think about it. In fact, I actually forgot about it for some time. And I happened to be in an Edgar Cayce study group at the time, and we would, of course, discuss the readings. In the course of conversations, I realized this fellow had the characteristics I wanted in a relationship. I was impressed with what he said of how he was handling things in his life. So he was looking for a golfing partner when his wife died from cancer, and we ended up going golfing together. And after golfing, we'd go for ice cream and visit. And he started talking again about various things in his life. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the person I think that I would like to have a relationship with. And so I, of course, went home, and guess what was on the list? The characteristics he was describing and acting out in his behaviors. So I asked him for dinner. It happened to be tax day, April 15th. And he came for dinner that day, and we've been a couple ever since, and we'll have 17 years on tax day this April of being in a relationship that is nowhere like the domestic violence I had in the past. I changed. I learned to be what was on the list. I had to become more spiritual, more honest, more sincere, loyal, trustworthy, and truthful. And when I became more of those characteristics, I know the universe brought that to me. I became a magnet, and I attracted like attracts like. I know from universal laws. We're going to talk about those on one of our sessions. And so when I changed, my reality changed. And that's really the way to move out of all of our problems, is as we adopt more loving resolutions, as we say, love never fails, then that love can actually come into our lives. And if you're interested in more details about domestic violence, I have a lot of videos on YouTube, about 133 at this point. And one is a total lecture describing the dynamics of domestic violence. And the one that follows it, Empowerment, actually has tools to help you change so you become the person you want in your relationship. So you, instead of playing the victim, which is what that is explained in the domestic violence lecture, the following video with Empowerment actually gives you tools to move into a better place where you're not being the victim anymore. You can choose not to play the victim part. You can empower yourself and have a different, when you have the cause changes, the effect is going to change. There's also a series of domestic violence videos on YouTube. There's a section, there's 4 of them in the session with Julia Widup, where I describe the problems that brought about the domestic violence, so I understand where it came from. And then the solutions and tools that I use to come out of my domestic violence. So there's a lot of other interviews I've had with my books that I have on Amazon that also, those interviews include many times the domestic violence situations and answers. So you'll find lots of help on YouTube if you look for Marilyn Redmond, and you'll find a wide variety of videos that you can enjoy. So as we're moving along out of that particular program from last week, hopefully that added a little bit of a conclusion and answers that you don't have to repeat the same thing over and over expecting different results. Some people call that insanity. So we get to move on into a better place. And today's topic is holistic health. If you've been tuned in, last week we said we were going to talk about holistic health today. And so a lot of people are still wondering what that's about and have questions. And hopefully I can give you some answers today. And if you have questions, call into 866-451-1451. And I hopefully can answer whatever questions you have. Holistic health is actually an approach to life from natural and loving ways, rather than focusing on the illness or the specific parts of the body. It's an ancient approach to health where you consider the whole person physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and you respond in loving ways to that situation. So when we come back from our break, we're going to find out a little bit about the history of holistic health. So stay tuned, and if your questions are ready for you to call in, it's 866-451-1451, and we'll be back in just a moment. I am Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails. We are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Glad you're still with us. And remember, you can call in your questions today at 866-451-1451, especially if you have questions about medicine or holistic health or how that affects you. We're talking today, hopefully, we're going to move from the history into the physical part of how that affects your body and your life. And you see, holistic medicine approaches it, as we just said before the break, as a whole person. So instead of just looking at the liver or the gallbladder or the hips or the ankles or, if you have edema, as I did at one time, and instead of looking at the different parts and trying to fix it, we're looking at the total aspect of how those parts interrelate and how they can be used to come together in a wholeness rather than just fixing one part, and then, of course, the problem shoots up in another place. Have you ever noticed how some people are sick, and then that goes away, and then they're sick again, and they're sick again? It's always a symptom when you're looking at something chronic, it's an emotional problem, which we're going to talk about in a second. And so if we really look at the root base of where is it coming from, and holistic health goes deeper than the symptoms. You can fix the symptoms, but they don't go away until the real problem is solved. And they first talked about this in China over 2,500 years ago. So alternative medicine, or however you want to describe complementary medicine, there's various terms, actually is extremely old, and it's not new medicine. It's actually been around for over 2,500 years, as I said. And it's based in our vital life force, in the Chinese called that qi. Different cultures have different terms for that energy within. Some call it prana. Maybe you've heard that term. And it uses herbal medicine, acupuncture, massage, qigong, and of course dietary help to keep our body sustained and in health. And it's about feeding the energy to all of the parts of our body so that it is sustainable, and it is actually getting the energy necessary for life. Herbal medicines are really kind of interesting. I've gone to a Chinese doctor for several years, and I found that they look kind of strange sometimes. I have a friend that shows up at my house. He saw me cooking the herbs one day to make tea, and he says, well, it looks like you went out into the woods and just gathered up all the stuff on the floor of the forest, and you got it in that pot, and you're cooking it for tea. And it does look kind of strange if you have that kind of herbal ingredients that you're making a tea from, and I had to learn how to adapt to enjoying it. I don't know if I ever really enjoy it, but it has its own distinct taste, and I've gotten accustomed to it. It's okay, and I know it's really helped. It's been a very beneficial thing in various parts. They can actually add different herbs for a lot of different problems into one tea, which for me was very helpful. And I'm sure some of you have heard of acupuncture. And that's based on the same premise. All Chinese medicine is based on there's a blockage in your energy system. And when the energy cannot flow through your system, you will manifest an illness or dis-ease. So when you're at dis-ease, it means your body is not in harmony and balance. And so we're trying to find ways on this program today to show you how you can find harmony and balance in your body by adding productive, positive, natural types of solutions. And acupuncture is a way to actually remove the barriers that are blocking the energy in your system. And it's, of course, been around for thousands of years. And so if you can find an acupuncturist near you, I found a studio where actually instead of one person at a time, they take a group of people at a time. So it makes the cost even more reasonable. It's very effective for all kinds of ailments because really as your energy is circulating, that's what needs to happen. And it's important that that happens. It's just like your blood needs to circulate through your body. If you are not getting the blood to the different parts of your body, of course, there's going to be a problem. And that nutrition that is carried in the blood around your body has to feed the cells of your body. And if the blood's missing, of course, they're not getting fed. And you know the results is not very good about that situation. The same thing happens with the energy has to go around and circulate in your body. And the cells are fed by the natural vital life force energy, just like the blood would feed them. Only this time we're talking about an invisible spiritual energy that is in all of us. It's in the plants, it's in the flowers, the trees, the animals, and of course in us. We are that energy in form. So with that energy, even though you don't see it, that's why people sometimes poo-poo holistic health, because it's an invisible energy. It's not something you can put your hands on. But if you are not in that circulation of it supporting your body, it's just like a plant in the darkness. It's going to die. You have to have that energy for life. And the more it can circulate, the healthier life you'll have. Massage helps this happen too, so the circulation is going to be effective in all parts of your system. And there's a Qigong is one way to also move the energy. I happen to know how to do that. And there's other similar types of massage or Qigong type of work that you can find people to help you with. We're going to have a guest on our show in a couple weeks that does Reiki, which also moves the energy. And she's going to talk about that in more detail for us. So if you also might know of EFT, where people do tapping to break forth the blocked energy. That energy is blocked through our emotions. And when we get in fear or anger, guilt, shame, envy, some people call it the 7 deadly sins, that literally blocks our energy from moving and circulating in our system. So what we are really trying to do is relax so the energy can flow to all the cells of our body so they can function and receive that energy for the health that it really supplies to us. So it's really important to understand that Chinese medicine helped all those people live till they are still Chinese around. It must have worked for all these many, many years. It's not new. It's very effective, and it's been probably proven longer than our more modern medicine is only really a little over 100 years old. So what I'm talking about is a lot older and very effective. And we're going to take a break now. I am your host, Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails. We are coming to you live from BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails, and we are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Welcome back. We've been talking about the history of holistic health, and I wanted to include a very important name today with our program, Baird T. Spalding. He was a faculty member, professor at Oxford University in England. And he went and traveled to the Far East. His university had a group of professors. They wanted to investigate what we didn't know in our medical field that was helpful, useful, and what was unavailable as far as what we today would call modern medicine. So they went on an investigative survey to find what they could find in India. And this was over 100 years ago now, much sooner since the Chinese were working on this. And fortunately, when he got to India with his group, I don't believe there was any coincidences, but he was able to connect with masters that have accomplished what we're talking about and finding the understandings at a deeper level. And he went from master, and all of a sudden, another master would appear with information that was not normally accessible by the public. It was really kind of a very cool thing that he was giving audience to people not normally available for the general public, and his group would go and they would have their discussions and questions. And as he was going from master to master, getting all this information, which actually validated what the Chinese were doing with their medicine, only this was in India. And towards the end of the book, not only is what we were talking about with the Chinese medicine that was he aware of, but they came up with the information that if you know the cause of the problem, then if you heal that cause, there won't be any symptoms. And this is the premise of which my clients come for counseling, is we go in to the subconscious, find the cause of the problem, heal it with a loving resolution, and there's no need for prescriptions or other medical information that is what people would normally get from a doctor, because if the problem is solved, then you taking care of it. So he was finding out this information himself, and he took it back to the university. And because they thought of it as very out of the box, rather discounted it and didn't do anything with the information, he ended up going back and living with the masters in Tibet. And his book, Finding Out the Original Answers for Medicine, was in his book, Journey to the East by Spalding. And then when he went back and lived with the masters, he wrote 6 little books, which are fascinating, about spiritual living and lifestyle. And those books are Teachings and Lives of Masters of the Far East. And if you're interested in this, those books would be very helpful to you. So that was like over about 150 years ago. So now we've moved from Chinese, we moved up to what India had to say about alternative medicines. And basically what they're doing is providing genuine energy to support our health. Currently, we have a Dr. Richard Gerber in his book, Vibrational Medicine, says that disease occurs when we are constricting the natural flow or creative consciousness, a subtle life form through our body, mind, and spirit. This is symbolic that something is wrong which needs to be rebalanced if lasting health is to be achieved. He also says that we need to recognize the human being is more than a body of flesh and bones. We possess a unique energy system that helps maintain our health. And so he's saying the very same thing that the Chinese have been saying for 2,500 years, and what Spalding discovered in India as today this is the answer for medical to change into more of this focus. In fact, he claims that our medical society is going to be moving into what is called vibrational medicine. And not only are we going to have a Reiki master on here, we're going to have a person with flower essences, which is another way to raise your vibrational energy. And he, in his book, Vibrational Medicine, has all kinds of ways to raise your energy, which we'll be talking about in this program. So there's a multitude of solutions here. And the father of holistic health today is Edgar Cayce. He's the first person that kind of became aware through the readings he gave. In his trance, he would give medical answers to people. They had their questions and would come to him, and all of these readings are documented at the ARE Institute in Virginia Beach. And so medical answers were given. And everybody has a different answer, actually, because we're all individuals. Nobody's a rubber stamp of another person. But there is a common theme, if you're starting to notice, that the root cause is really the difficulty. And I'm not saying that we don't need modern medicine, because if you have a child that falls out of the apple tree this spring, climbing trees, and he breaks an arm, get him to the doctor right away. You want to have a doctor take care of any broken bones that might happen. Or if somebody in your family is having a heart attack, call 911 right away. Get them to the hospital. Get that emergency help immediately. So modern medicine is extremely helpful for acute problems. What we're really talking about is something that's chronic, and it has probably a history in your life from somewhere. And that's what my regression therapy helps you find. Where did it start in your history, maybe your childhood? I also do past life regressions, and so sometimes we find it started in a past life or a past memory in your consciousness, and it's still hidden away, but if you bring it to the light of day, you can say, oh, is that what's going on? I had a client one day, she kept finding codependent men, and she felt she'd had enough of that story. So we went back in her history of what was going on in the situation, and all of a sudden we hit upon a particular incident, and she said, is that what I'm doing? I don't have to keep doing that. And she left a happy camper because she could just literally change her behavior and get different results. So you see, we don't have to recreate these things. And I like what Edgar Cayce says, there are in truth no incurable conditions. And that quote is what led me into finding more and more about holistic health, because I wanted to overcome all my difficulties. And if you know anything about my history or have read my books, you'll have read a lot about my history. I had a lot of dysfunctional background in my childhood and growing up. And so I had a lot of medical problems to overcome. And so if it says there's no incurable conditions, that means I don't have to stay in addiction. I don't have to stay mentally ill. I don't have to be in domestic violence or any of those other things. So as we move on in our program today, in just a minute, we'll be back to actually talk about the physical part of how we can look at that for for holistic health and improve our lives. So we'll be back in just a minute. I am Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. I'm your host, Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Welcome back. We're talking about holistic health, and we've been discussing the history of holistic health. And I happened to come across a book by Dr. John Tilden, and he wrote this book in 1974. So this, what I'm telling you isn't really brand new. His comment in the book Toxemia, the basic cause of disease, and when the truth is known that healing, or the power to throw off disease and get well, is wholly within the subconscious and is personal, we will know that curing and palliating by the administration of remedies, drugs, serums, vaccines, surgery, feeding to keep up the strength, etc., are superfluous, meddlesome, and on the order of throwing a monkey wrench into the machinery. So therefore, we don't want to throw that monkey wrench in. We want to not necessarily add drugs, serums, vaccines, or surgery or feed up the strength. We want to actually get to the root cause of why is there a dis-ease in your life? What's out of balance? And so how can we balance that? Well, since we're talking about the physical part of our lives, I have a little story about myself, because the physical part, can be kind of painful if you have broken bones, and I did. I had a broken tailbone. In fact, it was broken twice, they discovered in the x-ray. And so after a year and a half of being off Valium and the pain was still excruciating, my psychiatrist sent me to his doctor, who was an osteopath, which is not an MD, but they work more on the basis of what we're talking about today. So I visited this doctor, and he happened to have a machine called the Magnatherm, and I went daily for treatment, and then every other day, and then gradually weaned off, so it was, not as often. And lo and behold, my tailbone actually got healed. There wasn't any doctor that I went to that actually had any solution for my problem. So was I ever a happy camper? What I know today is the Magnatherm provided energy at a high vibration. And when you raise the vibration from the low dense energy, which keeps us in fear and stress and all the negative energies of our system, that, anger and jealousy and that kind of thing, if you're in that base of consciousness, you're going to be sick. But if you raise your consciousness, that vital energy inside, to loving energy, it heals, and it healed my tailbone. Now, because you can't see energy, it's often called quackery or discounted, dismissed, made fun of. I'm here to say what's invisible is more powerful than what you can see. It's the invisible energy, is the healing energy of our life. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That's called denial. In fact, Einstein actually proved that the formless can become form with his very famous mathematical solution. So when we are coming from the formless into form, we have to go back to what we don't see so the form can come back into its natural state. So anyway, I'm here to say that some of these things that have been poo-pooed in the past are actually discounted by those because they're not selling their products. Doesn't that sound like television or some of these other ads you see, don't buy so-and-so, it's, buy my product and don't buy theirs. And that's kind of what's going on. Probably the most important part of our physical is our diet. And Edgar Cayce had a marvelous diet. And if you want to email me, Marilyn, at angelicasgifts.com, I'll be glad to send off a copy of the diet. It looks like a circle with 4 circles inside the circle. And in the very center circle, he lists fruits, beverages, above ground vegetables, and below ground vegetables. And these supply 80% of your food for the day. Now, he was coming from encouraging people to have an alkaline system because disease will not grow in an alkaline basis. So if you're eating foods that are not acidy, but alkaline versus acid, you're going to have a healthier body. Almost all the manufactured foods out there have sugar added or other chemicals added. If you shop around the exterior of your grocery store, that's where you're going to find the fruits and the vegetables and the milk products and the healthier items that are not manufactured. And if you're looking in the center of the grocery store, you're going to get the macaroni and cheese and the whatever packaged items that are already processed. And they've added all kinds of chemicals, partly for shelf life, but also it contaminates a lot of our food. GMOs are a way of contaminating and eliminating the nutrition in our food. So MSG was one of the first things that was very popular to season your food, but it actually is addictive. And it also stops the energy from flowing because it's toxic. So if you've noticed that corn is now mostly a GMO, so you have to be careful and get organic corn. You have to be careful with a lot of items because they've added soy to them. If you've read the ingredients on the package, I spend more time looking at the little fine print ingredient. Don't necessarily read the label. Natural could mean a million things, and it's not necessarily what you're wanting. The tiny print where it says ingredients really tells you what's inside that item. And so I very carefully select things that do not have soy added or other chemicals and preservatives that are absolutely not necessary. I don't know why they keep adding all these chemicals, but chemistry is not the answer. Years ago on television, DuPont had an ad said better living through chemistry. Well, I discovered that it was not better living. It was actually dying through chemistry. So I've eliminated most of the toxic items in my diet. And so his diet is based on an organic before all these additives were added. So when he talks about juices, be sure that you're getting 100% juice and not something that's part water or partly sugar or other chemicals to flavor it. In fact, I've given up on orange juice, and I'll tell you that why I've given up on orange juice when we come back after this break. I am Marilyn Redmond, and this is Love Never Fails, and we are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails. We are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, I hope you're still with me because I have some interesting news about orange juice that I was going to share before the break. And when I found out, they pick the oranges when they need to off the tree, but they all have a different flavor because some are more ripe than others. And what they've done to orange juice is added a chemical to make it all taste the same. So the orange juice you're getting has a chemical added, so it tastes like nice fresh orange juice, but not all the oranges were probably ripe at the time they went into the juice, and they've adulterated it so it sails on the shelf and it is consistent. So I've gone to just plain old regular oranges and use that without the juice, and I find it works much better for me anyway. There is a way you can raise your energy that is very practical and very easy, and it's through water. Our system has to have circulation, and how does that circulate is the water in our system, but most of our waters are not as pure and clear as we would like. I happen to live in an area where the water in Edgewood actually won a national water contest for the best water in the United States. I'm very blessed. So on my water, I have put words to help raise the energy even to higher quality to bring up the consciousness in my body and body cells. And so Dr. Emoto was featured in the movie What the Bleep Do You Know? You might want to go get that. I think it's on YouTube. What the Bleep Do You Know? And Dr. Emoto was a scientist who took water crystals that had been exposed into very positive environments and environments that weren't positive, very bleak, dark, ugly type places. And he made water crystals, and the crystals in the wonderfully positive areas like Lucerne, words like angel were placed around the water. Positive, thank you, gratitude, whatever kinds of words you can think of that are very high quality words. Love, blessings. Those water crystals were beautiful, really gorgeous. And you'll see the pictures in his books. He has several books with the pictures of these crystals, of what they look like if they're in that environment. The words that were around the water, such as hate or Satan, microwaves, your cell phones, that kind of thing actually brings the water consciousness down. And so the actual crystals were very ugly, I guess is one way to put it. They looked terrible. I mean, they were just, I didn't want to have anything to do with them. They did not appeal to me, let me put it that way. So you can actually bring your water up to a healthy place. If you want to put healthy, positive words on your water, he suggested attaching appreciation and gratitude to the bottle and facing the words towards the inside of where the water is through the bottle. I use a clear plastic bottle and put it on paper and face the words towards the water hold it with a rubber band around the bottle outside. And then as I started getting healthier through drinking healthier water, which is 80% of our body content anyway, I changed the word to God. So on my water bottle today is the word God. In my latest book, Finding Reality Beyond Fear, there's a whole section on how to do this. And in even more details, my book, Paradigm Busters, Reveal the Real You, tells even more about raising the water that you're drinking into this healthier place so your body will circulate with healthy, sustaining energy. So the cells of our bodies have consciousness, and we want to keep them functioning so they're receiving this energy. And there are something called cell salts, CELL, and I take those daily for various reasons. You could take them if you have certain illnesses. In my case, I'm trying to balance out the body right now, so I'm using a combination of all of them from Highlands, has a great selection of cell salts. Now, to clean out your system, it's called detox. So we want to get rid of the negative, low energy, so you're in a healthier state of mind, which next week we'll talk about our mental state to bring our energy up. 2 ways to detox in a reasonable, less expensive way than flying to a fancy spa and spending thousands of dollars. You can eat apples for 3 days. Edgar Cayce suggests using delicious apples or Jonathan apples. The first time I tried the diet, I cooked applesauce and baked apples, and I was having a great time thinking of how am I going to fix these apples? Well, I'm here to tell you it was a waste because I discovered you don't cook the apples. Just eat the apples raw. When you're hungry, have another apple. Do this for 3 days. And at the end of the 3rd day, you want to take a tablespoon of olive oil, which is how you end the diet. And your system will detox from the apples absorbing what they needed to absorb. Another way to detox your system reasonably is through coconut oil. I use about 2 teaspoons of coconut oil in the morning, hold it in my mouth for 10 to 20 minutes, let it swish around my mouth. It's good for your teeth, too. But if you keep it in your mouth for like 20 minutes is really the best, and then you could, of course, spit it out. It is actually a very viable way to detox without a lot of rigmarole. I found it I could feel a difference in that detoxing. Actually, in my case, I felt it more than in the apple situation. So I have often gone, periodically I'll do the coconut oil, and detox that way. So if you still have any questions about holistic health, give me a call at 866-451-1451, and we will answer you whatever questions you have. We want you to know that holistic health is for your well-being, and some people have sent me questions today. And a question from Marietta was, what is the most important thing in life? Being happy or keeping others happy? Well, Marietta, that's a really good question because I was raised how to keep people happy, and I wasn't happy myself. So I had to learn that my happiness is my job. It's not my job to keep them happy, but it's my job to be happy so that when I'm a person that is happy, they can gain from my projecting my happiness, and it kind of gives them permission to be happy. So we have to find things that make ourselves happy. And the real trick to this is to get out of our ego. I've learned to be happy rather than right. I don't have to be in a discussion where I have all the answers. Now, if you know me, I'm an ex-teacher. I had the answers for 30 years, people. I've taught anything from kindergarten up through college. So I used to have the answers, but today I'd rather be right, and I'm a much happier person, and the other person's responsible for their happiness. So we're going to take our break here, and we'll be back in just a minute. I'm your host, Marilyn Redmond. This is Love Never Fails, and we are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. I am your host, Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails. We are coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Welcome back. And we've been talking about holistic health today, some history, and some ideas of how you can support your life with a better input for the physical part of your system. And that ad that was just on before I came on is just exactly what I'm talking about. So isn't that cool? We're all on the same wavelength. So next week, we're going to talk more about holistic health from a mental point of view, how your mind affects your health. And what you tell yourself is what your body will listen to, and it is very obedient. So we'll talk more about that with affirmations and things and answers and self-help and tools for next week. And in coming weeks, we're going to have Paula Vale, who is a Reiki master, and she will help us understand how that energy can improve our health also. So we want you to know that if you're interested in finding out more about myself, I have a website, Angelica's Gifts, that you might want to visit. I have a lot of different hats I wear. I've done a lot of counseling and readings over the internet or Skype or per telephone, and I'm available for people to do past life regressions, all kinds of help in your life, whatever the relationships or health problems are. So I have a lot of books, 10 books on Amazon.com, and they are very valuable. And just look at our health, our lifestyle, our relationships from different points of view. My latest book, Finding Reality Beyond Fear, takes you from the very beginnings of the feeling desperate and powerless into finding the truth of who you are. Paradigm Busters is a very thick 600-page book. It took me 25 years to write, and it's a more explanatory, detailed book about the same things with real specific tools. It's kind of like a workbook, basically, with all kinds of stories from my life and my clients of what actually has worked in our lives. I have a book called The Real Meaning of 2012, bringing a new paradigm of heaven to earth, and that's about releasing your ego. Well, our real problems actually come from the ego. Some people say ego is edging God out. So what I try to do is merge God in. And another word for God is love. The highest energy of the universe is love. And that's what we're about with holistic health and improving our lives in the spiritual journey, is to add more and more love into our lives. And there is no illness when you are in that loving, unconditional state of Christ consciousness, which we'll talk about coming up. So if you want to check out my lectures, interviews, and spiritual information at YouTube, there's 133 of them. So help me by watching those and join me next week. I am Marilyn Redmond. You are listening to Love Never Fails, and we are on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
You've been listening to Love Never Fails with your host, Marilyn Redmond. Go beyond old ideas and understandings and hear Marilyn's solutions to healing and a higher consciousness. Each week, here on Marilyn Redmond's Love Never Fails.